Hello, my name is Mayra Castro. I'm deaf. I come from a family that's all hearing, that's from Cuba. My parents are refugees. I also have 4 siblings. I have an older brother and sister who are 6 years apart. They're Cuban, and then the younger 2 siblings, my brother and I, were both American. We were born here. So my family immigrated to New York, and then we later moved to New Jersey, where I was born and raised. So I'm from Union City, and there's a strong Cuban community in New Jersey. It was probably in 1968 to the 80s. There was a lot of immigrant families from Cuba moving to that area. So it was a really great community there that I wasn't really aware of because I didn't have much exposure to that community growing up. So it was really just my family and I. We would move around a lot, but we had cousins in the area that we would go and visit in New York. So I got some exposure to the community that way, but I didn't fully understand my identity yet. I went to an oral school that my parents found, and we weren't allowed to sign there at all. And it was a mostly white school. There were maybe a few black students, and no one spoke any Spanish. So all my teachers were also white, so there were no really Cuban immigrants for me to look up to. My siblings spoke English when they went to school as their second language, but at home we only spoke Spanish. I felt like there were a lot of barriers in regards to communication as I grew up, so I would often ask my siblings to interpret for me, and it would always just be short side comments. But when I went to high school, I went to a mainstream high school, and there are more people that spoke English there, or sorry, Spanish, but I really had no sense of identity yet. I was able to get involved in sports, and once I graduated in '85, I went to NTID in Rochester, New York, and they have a deaf program there, and maybe around 200 students at the time, which was quite large. But I met more people, more deaf people who really had a sense of deaf pride, and I really didn't have that for myself at the time. But since I was used to being mainstreamed, I was able to learn ASL through the friends that I met there, and I was able to make new friends that way. And it was people from different states, from all across the US, from California, from Rochester, that were all coming to the school. And there I was able to meet a deaf teacher, and he taught a deaf history class, and I started asking him a bunch of questions about deaf history and his family. So I was able to learn so much from him about the 18th century, about France, about Laurent Clerc and Gallaudet. And he told me that there's Gallaudet University, and I had never heard of it because my high school hadn't told me anything about it. So I felt really frustrated that I hadn't been aware of that. But I spent 2 years doing data processing there. And after the 2 years, my father passed away. And my boss had told me that my father had suffered a stroke, and I was completely shocked. I was the baby of the family, so I was only 21 at the time, and I was the first one to attend university, so a lot of people were looking up to me as I was a woman. So I had to support my mom and see how she was doing for 5 years. So I wasn't able to spend that time going to school. Meanwhile, my siblings went to Gallaudet, and I had to put that on hold. Growing up, my family had always been tight, so once all my siblings started moving away, going to university, I thought I better go get my degree. And I really looked up to my siblings, so I wanted to follow in their footsteps. So I went to Gallaudet, and there were a lot of Hispanic students there, and we set up an organization at Gallaudet. The Hispanic Association. And Angel Ramos and John Lopez, they're two great mentors that I really felt a strong connection with based on our culture. And from them, I was able to learn a lot about developing my leadership skills, and they were able to give me some pointers. And I went to Texas for my first workshop, and I learned everything there about. I was part of a panel, and I wasn't sure where to begin, where to start my story, because I was still struggling with my own sense of identity and not really sure how that fit into my story. Because growing up my whole life, I had been part of a white community, and I hadn't developed my Hispanic sense of identity. So in that, I was really able to find a family and develop that. After that, I went back to Gallaudet, and they awarded me a leadership award, which was really nice. Once I graduated, I went back to Gallaudet, and I established the National Council for Hispanic and Deaf of Hard of Hearing at Gallaudet, which was the first one of its kind. And I was surprised. There were 400, maybe 300 people that were part of the committee and that registered, which really was able to develop my leadership skills even more. I was also able to socialize and set up workshops with different topics related to society and education and enjoyment. And we wanted to set up something for the kids, so we made a camp in Chicago that would happen every 2 years. And people from all over the country would come, from the East and the West, which was really cool to see everyone interact and meet new faces. some people, their goal was to get a degree in deaf and hard of hearing studies, but I think altogether around 6 or 7 people that started it, and then I was able to be a part of that and improve a sense of develop a sense of my identity. And that was the first time that I really had to come to terms with pride in my Hispanic community. And then this past fall, some people from Texas and from Mexico, I've really learned a lot about that culture and the Native, and really all the intersectionalities that exist. Next year in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, in 2016, I set up an organization, TSDLA, the Tri-State Deaf Latino Organization, because there were a lot of Spanish-speaking people in that area that would be interested. So I asked, and I went ahead and set it up. There were maybe 4 or 5 members to start, and then a lot of people started joining. And we all had the same goal and vision in mind. So we wanted to focus around socialization and education. And we'd meet every 2 months and hire different speakers from around the country. And we'd have speeches about leadership and awareness. And I'd really learn a lot from the different speakers that would come in. And I was really able to develop a sense of pride for myself. Because before I really hadn't felt that. I had felt communication barriers with my family and my parents. And I was frustrated at all the different barriers that I had to overcome. So being involved in the organization really helped me to develop that sense of self-confidence. That time I was living in Philadelphia for 5 years. And I always tried to stay positive. So I would help run the organization. So I later got involved in deaf women of color from across the country. Because I felt, one, well, I'm a woman and of my Hispanic background. So I wanted to be involved in that group. And then 3 or 4 years ago, I helped get involved in that. And we had a conference with a lot of different women from across the country. And it really helped us develop a sense of identity and community and figuring out how culture plays a role in all of that. We wanted to change it because beforehand we were only meeting every 2 years, and we wanted to change that. every 3 years we would have the I was working there every 3 years, but we wanted to change it to have the deaf women of color every 2 years. So we would have the national conference, and I would really look forward to that. But coming back to the NT, NTIDHH for youth, we really wanted to encourage kids to attend because it would give them Hispanic role models to look up to and give them a sense of community and someone that they could relate to. And if they had hearing parents, they could look to these deaf role models as well. But sometimes hearing parents didn't know, so we really had to encourage them and the other adults in children's lives to become involved. But some parents can't afford to fly out or pay the registration fees, which I understand. Some parents may not have a car, or all these reasons that kids may not be able to attend. So we decided to set up a local chapter and different chapters across the country that kids would be able to attend. I think altogether we had 7. Which wasn't bad to have on the east side. We had 2 on the west in Texas and California, but I decided that it might be a good idea to get the parents involved in the local chapters as well. So we really wanted to encourage that for the kids' sake. And in New Jersey, there was a lot of mainstream kids, and the school counselors had no idea about our organization. So it would say, so I set up a website that people could visit and they'd be able to find information about upcoming camps we'd be having and what we were all about for kids either mainstreamed or from a deaf school. So if you're interested, check our website out. Thanks.